Sometimes it takes losing everything to discover what was inside you all along. Betrayal doesn't just break hearts, it awakens fire. Cheating billionaire forces his pregnant wife to leave with nothing. She destroys him in minutes. They called him the silver magnate, an untouchable billionaire who could bend the world to his will with just the flick of a pen. She was the elegant beauty who once captured his heart, standing beside him at star-studded galas, basking in the glow of an extravagant life. But beneath the polished marble floors and glittering chandeliers lay an ugly truth. He was ruthless, manipulative, and hiding a secret affair when she discovered she was pregnant. He did the unthinkable, forcing her out of their mansion without a dime to her name. Little did he know her. Her determination to seek justice would soon bring him to his knees. Nathaniel Whitmore was the kind of man whose name rang across continents. Born into a world of privilege, he magnified it with his sharp intellect and unwavering ambition. By the age of 38, Nathaniel stood at the helm of Whitmore Capital Holdings, a heavyweight contender on the financial markets, with connections spanning from Dubai to Tokyo. Reporters often referred to him as the Silver Magnate, a moniker he wore as comfortably as his custom-tailored suits. His boardroom presence was undeniable. Every meeting was a battlefield, where Nathaniel's brilliant strategies outmaneuvered seasoned financiers twice his age. Elise Marlowe was the polar opposite in upbringing, yet her radiance and wit turned heads in any room she entered. Raised in a modest home on the outskirts of Charleston, South Carolina, she learned early on the value of hard work and sincerity. Her parents had owned a small coastal inn near the serene waters of the Low Country, instilling in her the virtue of genuine hospitality. Armed with an unwavering belief in love and loyalty, Elise moved to Chicago in her 20s, determined to carve her own destiny. She had a passion for interior design, and soon her unique creative flair earned her a modest but loyal clientele. It was at a charity event for the Windy City Children's Research Trust that their paths first collided. Elise had been invited by a client who appreciated her design expertise. Nathaniel was the keynote speaker, cutting a striking figure on stage with his confident gestures and resonant voice. His speech about philanthropic responsibility, a term he claimed all wealthy individuals should embrace, electrified the crowd. Even Warren Buffett nodded in approval from the front row. Who had donated to the cause that evening, nodded in approval from the front row after the speech. Elise was captivated enough to linger near the stage. In a moment that felt almost scripted, Nathaniel spotted her. He made his way through the throng of guests, introduced himself with the kind of charm usually reserved for silver screen leading men, and asked her name. Elise, initially stunned by his direct approach, answered with poise. Her cheeks flushed, but she met his gaze with quiet confidence. He found her modesty refreshing, so far removed from the usual arrogance and social climbing he often encountered. There was something disarming in her voice, something that made him pause just half a second longer than usual. Their first official date was at Alinea, one of the city's top Michelin-starred restaurants. The night buzzed with energy and possibility. It was supposed to be just another polished evening among many in Nathaniel's well-rehearsed dating life. But something was different. Elise didn't try to impress him. She listened, challenged, and laughed in a way that felt dangerously sincere. They spoke for hours, about her dreams of designing boutique hotels that were not only luxurious but also deeply sustainable, and about his plans to transform Whitmore Capital Holdings into a powerhouse that financed green tech ventures and community development programs. Elise, naive and hopeful, believed she had found a man whose ambitions aligned with her own moral compass. He watched her across candlelight and wondered, strangely, what it would be like to build something real, something lasting. Within a year, their whirlwind romance led them to say "I do" in a lavish ceremony at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Chicago. The guest list brimmed with luminaries, CEOs of multinational companies, senators, celebrities, and even a cameo by Idris Elba. Everywhere, the hush of awe enveloped them. Elise, resplendent in a Monique Lillet gown, felt like she was living a fairy tale. She never forgot the gentle tears that glistened in her father's eyes as he walked her down the aisle, nor the look of pride on her mother's face as she embraced the Whitmore family for the obligatory wedding photos. But beneath the crystal chandeliers and picture-perfect smiles, a silent current pulsed, one Elise couldn't quite name. A faint chill beneath the warmth, a flicker she chose not to see. But high society has its own rules and unspoken pacts. Before her wedding, Elise had signed a prenuptial agreement, a typical arrangement for someone of Nathaniel's stature, or so she was told. Though it pricked her sense of romantic trust, Nathaniel charmed her with sweet promises of security. "The prenup is just a formality," he said. "You'll never have to worry about money. I want you to be happy, always." The words wrapped around her like silk, soft, luxurious, and impossible to see through. She wanted to believe him so badly, she never questioned what might lie beneath. In the beginning, Elise was thrilled to host charity events, decorate their penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, and accompany Nathaniel to boardroom dinners. Their home was a testament to her artistic vision, floor-to-ceiling windows, plush earth-toned sofas, and walls adorned with abstract paintings from emerging artists she admired. Their gatherings were the talk of the town, featuring the right balance of opulence and warmth. Some nights they'd lie awake in bed, discussing future family plans. 2, maybe 3 children, a second home by the Amalfi Coast, a pledge to remain each other's best friend through every storm life might throw at them. They spoke of forever like it was guaranteed, like love alone could weather anything. But the cracks appeared gradually, like hairline fractures in fine china. A suspicious text on Nathaniel's phone here, a late-night business call there. Elise reasoned it away. He was a billionaire after all, and what billionaire isn't busy? She tried to see the best in him, telling herself that it was her job to be supportive. Yet the hush of night sometimes found her awake, her heart uneasy. Listening to the hum of the city below as the tension in her chest grew, she told herself. It was paranoia, a leftover instinct from her simpler upbringing. Little did she know that beneath the polished smiles and sweet words, Nathaniel was orchestrating a life she never imagined possible, one where her love and loyalty would be trampled in a ruthless quest to protect his image and fortune. Still, in the early days, Elise cherished the illusions of a perfect marriage, trusting wholeheartedly that Nathaniel truly loved her. Those illusions were about to be shattered irrevocably. Almost 2 years into their marriage, Elise noticed she felt more fatigued than usual. She brushed it off as the demands of her design projects and the philanthropic functions she organized. Then came the bouts of morning nausea. One chilly January morning, she woke before dawn feeling unusually queasy, racing to the bathroom. She felt her stomach lurch, and by the time Nathaniel stirred from his side of the bed, her suspicions crystallized. She might be pregnant. Elise purchased a home pregnancy test in secret, not wanting to raise Nathaniel's hopes or concerns unnecessarily. And there it was, 2 pink lines, confirming that their carefully laid plans for a family were becoming a reality sooner than expected. A swirl of excitement and anxiety consumed her. She recalled his words, "I can't wait to have kids with you. We'll show them the world." She decided to share the news that evening. That evening, however, Nathaniel returned unusually late. He had been traveling extensively, first to Berlin for a high-stakes merger, then to Seoul for a global tech conference. His once frequent calls and messages had dwindled, replaced by rushed texts that always ended with the same generic sentiment. "Love you. Busy. Talk soon." Elise had left him 6 voicemails over the last 2 days, all unanswered. By the time Nathaniel stepped into their penthouse, the clock neared midnight. Elise, fighting to stay awake, greeted him with a relieved smile. She tried to hide her disappointment at his tardiness as she brought him his favorite scotch on the rocks and gently massaged his shoulders. "Long day?" she ventured, hoping for some semblance of emotional intimacy. "Yes," he replied curtly, draining the scotch in a single gulp. He loosened his tie and sank into a velvet armchair facing the window. The city sparkled below, but in Elise's chest a quiet panic bloomed, dread forming an icy knot that curled into every corner of her ribs. Something about his distant demeanor weighed heavily on her. He wasn't just tired, he was unreachable. "I have some news," she began softly, stepping closer to him. She rested a trembling hand on her abdomen, hoping he'd notice the significance. He glanced up, eyebrows raised. "You do? All right, let's hear it." No warmth, no curiosity, just pure indifference. His eyes flicked to her stomach, then away again, like he was dodging responsibility in real time. She exhaled, willing herself not to cry. "I'm pregnant, Nathaniel. We're going to have a baby." A shy, hopeful smile spread across her face. For a fleeting moment, his expression softened, almost as if he might stand up and wrap her in the tightest embrace. But just as quickly, he masked it with a polished smile that failed to reach his eyes. "That's wonderful news," he said at last, though his voice lacked the enthusiasm she'd prayed for. She waited for him to move, to touch her belly, to say something real. But he only turned his gaze back to the skyline, as if the city lights were far more important than the life growing inside her. Elise felt the blow of disappointment, but she tried to soothe herself with rationalizations. He's tired. He's stressed about the new business deals. He needs time to process. But deep down, something cracked. Not a dramatic shatter, just a fissure. But it was enough to let in the cold. The next day, she woke up determined to allow him space, thinking that a heartfelt celebration of this baby could come later. She immersed herself in researching prenatal vitamins and secretly scheduled a doctor's appointment. She browsed for baby clothes, tiny onesies that melted her heart. She even bookmarked articles on how to tell if a partner was just stressed or hiding something. But as her pregnancy progressed, Nathaniel's behavior turned more erratic. He would vanish for days on alleged business trips, returning with only a perfunctory kiss on the forehead. When asked about the reasons behind his extended absences, he became evasive, even snapping at her on occasion. Calls went unreturned more often than not. The affectionate man she once knew had retreated behind a wall of secrecy that Elise couldn't breach. Then came the dinner at the Langham. Nathaniel was hosting a small gathering for foreign investors, and he insisted that Elise join to maintain appearances. She found herself seated next to a well-known investment banker and longtime friend of Nathaniel's, Julian Fairchild. Julian was a jovial man with a slight British accent, rumored to have cut deals with Citibank and Baird Capital that soared into the billions. Across the table, Nathaniel was engrossed in conversation with a stunning brunette named Alessia Moretti, an up-and-coming hedge fund manager from Italy. Elise felt a pang of jealousy shoot through her. The brunette's manicured hand lingered on Nathaniel's arm a bit too long whenever she laughed. Her body language radiated flirtation. Elise blinked twice, willing herself to remain composed, but every cell in her body screamed a silent alarm. Alessia's laugh was just a little too light, her eyes a little too locked on him. At first, Elise doubted herself. Maybe this was just business banter. Maybe it was all in her head, the hormones, the fatigue. But the more she observed, the more the coil of insecurity tightened in her gut. Over the course of the evening, she witnessed hushed whispers between them, exchanged looks that held an intimacy far too personal for colleagues, the kind of glances Elise used to share with Nathaniel before things grew cold. Elise tried to remain poised, projecting the calm grace of a supportive wife. She dabbed the corners of her mouth with her napkin, forcing a smile so steady it nearly cracked her face. When dinner concluded, she hurried to Nathaniel's side and looped an arm through his. He stiffened at her touch. "I'm tired. I need to head home," Elise said softly, hoping he'd offer to escort her. Instead, he forced a polite smile and replied, "Go on without me. I need to finalize some details with Alessia." His words fell like ice water down her spine. The car ride home was torturous. Elise's heart pounded with confusion and a growing sense of betrayal. She recalled every rumor she'd shrugged off in the past, tales of Nathaniel's roving eye, his rumored dalliances with corporate assistants, the whispered scandals that always mysteriously disappeared from the tabloids. She had defended him time and again, trusting his explanations over gossip. But now, the once steadfast faith in her husband faltered under the weight of mounting evidence. Even the silence between them had become a form of cruelty. Over the next few weeks, Elise tried talking to him about her suspicions. Each time, he deflected with impatience or hostility. "Don't be ridiculous," he'd hiss, voice dripping with annoyance. "Alessia is just a contact for a European expansion. Stop inventing dramas in your head." His words cut like glass, but what hurt more was the way he looked through her, as if she were furniture, not his wife. With every passing day, Elise felt more alone, overshadowed by a presence she couldn't fully name or confirm. She prayed that what she witnessed was mere business chemistry, but deep inside, an ominous dread told her otherwise. In her 6th month of pregnancy, Elise woke up in the middle of the night to find Nathaniel gone. A half-packed suitcase in the hallway signaled an unannounced trip. She searched the penthouse for a note, a text, anything explaining his abrupt departure, but found nothing. The silence enveloped her like a suffocating shroud. She was left to stare at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, tears streaming down her face as she cradled the gentle swell of her belly. Night after night, she wrestled with the urge to demand answers, to confront him with the fury she felt she deserved to unleash. Yet she also yearned for the Nathaniel she'd married, the attentive man who once whispered sweet nothings in her ear. Still, his indifferent dismissal and the possibility of heartbreak paralyzed her. She stood frozen by the bathroom door, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the sink. The silence around her wasn't peaceful, it was deafening. Little did she know her worst nightmares were about to come true. And the cruelest twist was about to commence. The message arrived on a Sunday morning, a day Elise had hoped they might spend choosing paint colors for the nursery. She found a printed letter propped on the marble kitchen island, sealed in a Whitmore Capital Holdings envelope. Its contents would devastate her entire world in a single stroke. Dear Elise, it is with great consideration and regret that I have decided to file for divorce. Enclosed, you will find all relevant documentation, including a request that you vacate our shared residence within 7 days. Please be assured that I have your best interests at heart. However, according to the terms of our prenuptial agreement, you will not receive alimony or property rights. You may keep the personal items you brought into our marriage. Sincerely, Nathaniel Whitmore. The lines felt cold, meticulously calculated by someone with no semblance of compassion. There was no mention of love, no remorse, not even the decency of a face-to-face conversation. Elise read them 3 times, each iteration tightening a vice around her chest. She sank onto a bar stool, feeling her stomach churn. 7 days. She had 7 days to leave the only home she'd known for nearly 3 years, while 6 months pregnant with his child. Her hands trembled. She pressed her palm against her belly, as if shielding the baby from the words that had just shattered their world. She tried calling Nathaniel, but it went straight to voicemail. She texted him, pleading for an explanation, for a conversation, for anything, but got no response. Nothing. Not even a coward's apology. It took everything in her not to collapse into hysterics. Instead, she forced herself to breathe, to recall that she wasn't just fighting for herself now. She was fighting for the life inside her. Desperate for some clarity, she phoned Julian Fairchild, the friend from the Langham dinner. Maybe he knew something. Maybe he could talk sense into Nathaniel. Julian answered in a subdued tone. Elise, I'm sorry. He began. I've heard rumors that Nathaniel is, well, he's serious about this. He's been seeing someone else and wants to finalize matters before the baby arrives. A painful silence followed. Who, Alessia? Elise asked, the name barely escaping her lips. Julian sighed. Yes, that's what I'm hearing. I can't confirm, but it's not the first time I've heard her name linked to his. I tried talking to him. He's convinced it's for the best. Something about not wanting any public scandal that might harm his standing. If it gets messy, you know how he is about his public image. Elise's eyes burned with tears. The magnitude of the betrayal left her breathless. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the erasure of her place in his world. Was she really so disposable? She stared at the pristine kitchen counters and the glimmering chandelier above, the domestic dream she'd believed in so fully. She had picked that chandelier herself. Every inch of this place had once felt like theirs. Now it mocked her. She tried to pull herself together, to think logically. Instead, she felt a raw ache so profound it almost paralyzed her. All day, she wrestled with the despair, wandering the penthouse in a daze. She passed framed photos and carefully arranged decor, testaments to a life she'd curated with love, now abandoned like window dressing. Eventually, she realized that her heartbreak was overshadowed by a more pressing fear. If she were to leave with nothing, how would she provide for herself and her unborn child? She had some savings from her interior design work, but nowhere near enough to sustain her through a costly legal fight with Nathaniel. The prenuptial agreement was notoriously ironclad, or so everyone claimed. In her innocence, she had never even retained her own legal counsel before signing it. She remembered the way he'd smiled when she signed it, confident, charming, and utterly unreadable. She hadn't known she was sealing her own trap. Still, a spark of defiance ignited inside her. She had spent years supporting Nathaniel, organizing philanthropic events that burnished his image, creating a nurturing environment at home, even stepping back from expanding her own career to focus on his. She had given up opportunities, put her ambition on pause. For him, for them. And this was her reward? If he thought she would walk away quietly, he was gravely mistaken. She resolved that if he wanted to cast her aside, she would at least force him to face the consequences of his cruelty. Within 2 days, she packed her essentials into 2 suitcases. Tearfully, she walked through each room in the penthouse, memories flooding back, her laughter echoing in the living room during their first Christmas, the corner of the bedroom where she first told him she loved him, the nursery she'd barely begun planning. She paused longest in that nursery, staring at the unopened paint cans, the still-folded crib instructions, the onesie that said, "Hello World." She fought a war within herself. Heartbreak over losing the life she'd built, and steely determination to fight for what she believed she deserved. And so, late one night, she left. The doorman offered a sympathetic nod as he helped load her luggage into a cab. Elise clutched her phone and wallet, feeling the subtle weight of her unborn child inside her. As the taxi pulled away from the glittering tower, she felt a wave of panic. Where would she go? She ended up at a small hotel in downtown Chicago, its modest lobby a far cry from the opulence she was used to. The manager, a kindly older man named Gerald, recognized her from a charity gala she'd helped organize for local homeless shelters. "Miss Whitmore?" he whispered, surprised to see her in jeans and a wrinkled coat. Looking exhausted and teary-eyed, Elise forced a watery smile. "I just need a quiet place, Gerald. Discreet, if that's possible." Gerald nodded in understanding, and within minutes, she had a comfortable, if humble, room. That night, Elise curled up on the bed, hugging a pillow and wishing it were Nathaniel's arms. But the memory of his callous letter hardened her resolve. She wasn't alone. She had the baby, and she owed it to that tiny life to be strong. Morning arrived, and she knew what she had to do. Find a lawyer. Someone formidable enough to challenge the power and wealth of Nathaniel Whitmore. She spent hours scrolling through law firm websites on her phone. A name surfaced repeatedly. Morgan and Associates. Rachel Morgan. Elise recalled reading about Rachel in a Forbes article titled America's Top 10 Divorce Attorneys for the Elite. She was renowned for her ruthless cross-examinations and her ability to dismantle even the most airtight prenuptial agreements. She had represented celebrities, captains of industry, and even a European princess in a highly publicized settlement. If anyone could take on Nathaniel and his high-powered legal team, it was Rachel. Summoning all her courage, Elise dialed the number. A crisp female voice answered. "Morgan and Associates, how may we help you?" "Hello," Elise said, her voice trembling slightly. I need to speak with Miss Rachel Morgan about a divorce case. It's urgent." The assistant hesitated for a moment, likely accustomed to endless calls from potential clients who might not afford the firm's retainer. "Ma'am, we're quite booked. Do you have counsel who can speak to Miss Morgan's office for a referral?" Elise swallowed hard. "I don't. This is a high-profile situation. My name is Elise Whitmore. Perhaps you've seen me in the news. My husband is Nathaniel Whitmore." She paused, letting that sink in. Even if the name no longer brought her comfort, she knew the gravity it carried in legal circles. A longer pause followed. "Please hold," the assistant finally said, her tone shifting into professional urgency. Within minutes, Rachel Morgan herself picked up. Her voice was melodic, yet steeled with confidence. "Miss Whitmore, I understand you're in need of representation. I have an opening this afternoon at 4. Can you make it to my office?" Relief cascaded over Elise. "Yes, absolutely. I'll be there." That day, Elise stepped into the sleek offices of Morgan and Associates, her shoulders squared, fighting off nerves. She noticed the hush of deference the staff offered Rachel whenever she appeared. The attorney was in her mid-40s, with an elegant bob haircut, a tailored navy pantsuit and an air of unflinching authority. She extended her hand in greeting. "Elise, I've been following your story from the tabloids. Please, come in." The next hour was a whirl of intense conversation, with Elise explaining the prenuptial agreement, the timing of Nathaniel's betrayal, and her pregnancy. Rachel's sharp eyes flashed with empathy, and then a cunning determination. "Well, you've come to the right place," Rachel said, leaning back in her seat. "The prenuptial agreement is formidable, but no agreement is entirely bulletproof. We'll need to gather evidence, challenge the conditions under which you signed, and highlight the moral turpitude of forcing a pregnant wife out on the street. Judges don't look kindly on a father who abandons his unborn child." Elise's heart soared with cautious hope. She told Rachel everything: the suspicious texts, the nights Nathaniel didn't come home, Alessia's presence. She even recalled a detail that might prove crucial: Nathaniel's repeated promises that she would always be cared for, made verbally, but never captured in writing. "He told me the prenup was just a formality, that if anything happened, I'd be taken care of." Her eyes filled with tears. "I believed him." Rachel nodded. "We can argue undue influence or misrepresentation. This is going to be a fight, no question about it. Whitmore's legal team is top-notch, but I've bested them before, and I can do it again." She paused, then offered a small, comforting smile. "You're not in this alone, Elise. We'll hold him accountable for every single tear he's made you shed." In that moment, a sense of gratitude washed over Elise. She realized that for the first time in weeks, she felt something resembling hope. Yes, Nathaniel had cast her aside. Yes, he wielded enormous power. But she was not powerless. She had her will to fight. And now she had Rachel Morgan. That night, alone in her hotel room, Elise pressed her hands gently to her belly and whispered, "We're going to be okay." She believed it, or at least wanted to believe it, because the real battle was just beginning, and Nathaniel Whitmore was about to learn that the woman he had underestimated had far more strength than he ever gave her credit for. The following week, Elise found herself thrust into a whirlwind of legal preparations. Rachel Morgan wasted no time assembling a strategic team. Paralegals rummaged through business records, bank statements, and every public document that could hint at Nathaniel's missteps. Private investigators were dispatched to gather details about Alessia Moretti and any other women rumored to have been in Nathaniel's orbit. The office buzzed with urgency, folders piled high, whiteboards filled with dates, and Rachel at the center, like a general preparing for war. Elise had never felt so terrified and so determined all at once. What surprised Elise most was the groundswell of quiet support she received from unexpected corners. A few individuals from Nathaniel's social circle reached out privately, sharing stories of his increasingly ruthless conduct. Some offered screenshots, vague but damning. Others simply whispered, "It's about time someone stood up to him." One of the most significant revelations came from a former executive assistant at Whitmore Capital. He confided that he had personally scheduled suspicious late-night business meetings for Nathaniel at upscale hotels. "If you need me to testify, I will," the assistant whispered over the phone. "I left the company because I couldn't stomach the lies anymore." Elise's hands trembled as she took notes. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was evidence. This was justice within reach. Elise's best friend from college, Natalie Brooks, also stepped in. Natalie lived in a cozy townhouse in Lincoln Park and insisted that Elise move in temporarily, free of charge. "I can't let you waste your money on a hotel," Natalie declared. "It's you and me against the world, and you know I'll help with anything. Grocery runs, moral support, you name it." Elise gratefully accepted, moved by the generosity. Despite everything, the sorrow of losing her home weighed on her like an anchor. She missed the way the sun used to stream through the penthouse windows. But in Natalie's home, she felt something rare and fragile. Safe, but being surrounded by a friend's warmth offered a fragile lifeline. Meanwhile, Rachel discovered a potent angle. Nathaniel's relationship with Alessia Moretti had begun months before the letter forcing Elise out. Through phone records and eyewitness accounts, they pieced together a timeline that suggested not only an affair, but also Nathaniel's attempt to push Elise away to avoid any complications. "He's orchestrated this to ensure a clean break," Rachel explained. and that can significantly weaken the prenuptial agreement's enforceability. It undermines the notion of mutual good faith. Her voice was calm, but her eyes gleamed with fire. Elise knew then. Rachel wasn't just building a case, she was building a reckoning. Elise felt a spark of triumph. Even so, she was plagued by fears late at night, of Nathaniel retaliating, or the heartbreak of confronting his betrayal face-to-face in court. She was not naive. She understood that a man as powerful as Nathaniel could play dirty. The potential for media scrutiny was immense, and she worried about the toll it might take on her unborn child. The tension escalated when a courier delivered a legal summons to Natalie's townhouse. Reading through the official documents, Elise's stomach turned as she saw the signatories from Morgan, Gates & Flanagan, one of the fiercest law firms in Chicago. They represented corporate tycoons, famous political figures, and sometimes even foreign dictators. They had also been on the winning side of some messy divorces that left the other spouse with next to nothing. Nathaniel had spared no expense in hiring the best, clearly setting the stage for a grueling battle. "I expected this," Rachel said calmly when Elise forwarded the documents. "Don't let it scare you. We have what we need to fight back." What followed was a series of pretrial meetings, depositions, and strategy sessions. Rachel coached Elise meticulously. "They'll try to discredit you," she warned. "They might argue that you married him for his money, or that you signed the prenup with full knowledge. They could even question the paternity of the baby." Hearing that last possibility sent Elise's anger flaring. "That's absurd," she said, tears brimming. "Nathaniel knows the baby is his." Rachel's expression hardened. "They'll still use it if they think it'll weaken your case. That's the level of tactics we're dealing with. But we won't let them get away with it." Elise clenched her fists. "I refuse to let him win. Not after what he's done." One evening, after a long day of strategy meetings, Elise was in bed perusing an old photo album on her phone. Pictures of her and Nathaniel smiling at a beach in Santa Barbara, laughing in front of the Louvre, waltzing during their wedding reception under crystal chandeliers. Each photograph felt like a ghost haunting her heart. She had truly loved him, believed in him. How could that same man force her into this nightmare? As tears threatened to fall, Natalie entered with a tub of Ben & Jerry's ice cream and 2 spoons. "You look like you need this," she said softly, climbing onto the bed next to Elise. They ate in comfortable silence at first, the sweet coldness of the ice cream countering Elise's swirling emotions. "It's unbelievable," Elise murmured eventually. 2 years ago, I was sure I'd spend the rest of my life with him. Now, all I feel is anger, sadness, and a burning drive to protect my baby." Natalie gave her a gentle squeeze. "You're doing the right thing, Elise. Don't let him gaslight you into thinking otherwise." It was a small moment of solace in a sea of turmoil. Elise clung to it tightly. In Natalie's arms, she didn't feel like a broken wife. She felt like a mother reclaiming her power. The next day, a call from one of Rachel's private investigators brought a significant breakthrough. They had tracked down a security guard from a boutique hotel in Los Angeles, where Nathaniel allegedly spent time with Alessia. The guard was willing to confirm that Nathaniel's visits coincided with reservations under a pseudonym for a Miss Moretti. In exchange for anonymity and some legal protections, he agreed to testify to the affair in court. More evidence trickled in. Receipts for lavish gifts purchased in Milan that were never delivered to Elise. Credit card statements for romantic dinners in Paris on nights Nathaniel claimed to be on business trips alone. Custom jewelry with Alessia's initials. A reservation at a private villa on the Amalfi Coast. All of it billed discreetly under business expenses. Rachel wasted no time weaving this evidence into a compelling narrative. "This shows a pattern," she explained at the next strategy meeting. "He not only broke marital vows, but also schemed to evade legal responsibility. We can argue that he deliberately orchestrated the prenuptial terms to place you in a financially vulnerable position while using marital assets on his affair." Rachel's tone was calm, but her eyes burned with conviction. Elise felt a righteous indignation stir in her. In a different life, she would have considered airing their dirty laundry publicly to be unspeakably shameful. But this wasn't gossip. It was truth, sharpened into a weapon, and she would wield it. But Nathaniel had drawn first blood, and now she had every right to fight back. It wasn't about revenge, though she couldn't deny the satisfaction in exposing his hypocrisy. It was about justice, and ensuring that her child's future wouldn't be ruined by a father who treated them like an inconvenience. Amid the legal chaos, Elise attended her prenatal checkups. The stress weighed on her body, and her OB/GYN, Dr. Miller, warned her to rest. "This level of anxiety isn't healthy for the baby," Dr. Miller cautioned. "Try to find some moments of peace, if you can." Following her doctor's advice, Elise devoted an hour each morning to quiet meditation, focusing on her growing baby. She shut out thoughts of court battles and depositions. Inhale serenity, exhale dread. Some days were easier than others. The small fluttering kicks in her abdomen reminded her that she was fighting for more than money. She was fighting for a life, a chance at a stable future for her child. Meanwhile, rumors swirled in high society circles. The tabloids caught wind of Nathaniel's pending divorce from his pregnant wife and his apparent involvement with Alessia Moretti. Magazine covers splashed with headlines like "Silver Magnate's Golden Mistress" and "Whitmore Baby in the Crossfire." The crossfire. Gossip talk shows analyze the situation with invasive speculation, sometimes painting Elise as a naive gold digger, sometimes casting her as a tragic heroine. The media frenzy only fueled Rachel's resolve. She knew public opinion could influence judges in high-profile cases. Nathaniel tried to manipulate the narrative. A statement from Whitmore Capital's public relations department labeled the divorce a personal matter, and insinuated that Elise and Nathaniel had amicably chosen to part ways due to irreconcilable differences. The statement offered no apology for his affair, no acknowledgement of Elise's pregnancy beyond a vague reference. The gall of it incensed Rachel. "He's desperate to control the storyline," she sneered. "But the truth will come out." At one point, Elise received an unexpected call from Nathaniel's mother, Victoria Whitmore. They had never been particularly close. Victoria had always been civil but maintained an aloof distance. "Elise," she said in a measured tone, "I heard about what's happening. I'm sorry. I know Nathaniel can be difficult." There was a weary resignation in Victoria's voice, as though she knew all too well how her son operated. "I can't interfere," she added, "but I hope you find peace." Elise felt a moment of sorrow. Peace. That was a distant dream right now. She thanked Victoria and hung up, feeling more certain than ever that she was on her own. Save for her lawyer and a handful of allies, even Nathaniel's family acknowledged the futility of attempting to reason with him. As the trial date approached, both sides filed motions and counter-motions. Court appearances loomed. The tension was palpable. Yet through it all, Rachel assured Elise that they had a strong case. The evidence of Nathaniel's affair, his underhanded dealings, and the moral reprehensibility of discarding a pregnant wife formed a powerful trifecta. If a judge saw it the way they hoped, it could nullify certain provisions of the prenup, awarding Elise a substantial settlement and child support. For Elise, victory was never about the money alone. It was about preserving her dignity, ensuring her child's well-being, and proving that Nathaniel's betrayal wouldn't break her spirit. And so, even though her nights were sleepless and her heart felt heavy, Elise forged ahead, determined to see justice served. Little did she know, the actual court battle would reveal more secrets and push both parties to the brink of desperation. The day of the first court hearing arrived under an overcast sky, as though the heavens themselves braced for the storm about to unfold. Elise stood outside the imposing marble steps of the Cook County Circuit Court in Chicago. Her pulse thundering in her ears, reporters jostled for position, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. The chaos buzzed like static in her brain. She felt a wave of disorientation. This was a far cry from her quiet life in Charleston, South Carolina, and certainly not the kind of public spectacle she'd ever wanted. She'd once walked those sleepy streets hand in hand with Nathaniel, dreaming of a future built on love. Now, she was walking into a courtroom to dismantle what remained. Rachel guided her swiftly through the throng, deflecting questions with a practiced, "No comment at this time." Inside, the corridors buzzed with legal professionals in sharp suits. Elise clutched a folder containing documents Rachel had instructed her to keep close. She didn't let go, not even for a second. It felt like the only tangible control she had left. They entered a high-ceilinged courtroom. Nathaniel was already seated at the defendant's table, flanked by 3 lawyers from Morgan, Gates, and Flanagan. He looked every bit the unruffled Titan, impeccably groomed hair, an expensive navy suit, and a face devoid of remorse. Next to him, Alessia Moretti sat in the gallery. Her gaze was steady and self-assured. She didn't flinch, she didn't fidget, she just stared, as if daring Elise to blink first. The sight ignited a tempest in Elise's stomach. Alessia's presence was like a brazen declaration: we're together, and you can't do anything about it. Elise gripped the folder tighter. Her knuckles turned white. She could feel the baby shifting inside her, as if responding to the storm within. The proceedings began with a crisp bang of the gavel. The judge, a stern woman named Justice Martinez, presided with an air of seasoned authority. She called for opening statements. Rachel rose, exuding calm confidence. "Your Honor, this is a case not just about divorce, but about exploitation and betrayal. My client, Elise Whitmore, was forced out of her home while pregnant with the defendant's child, left with no financial support due to a prenuptial agreement signed under dubious circumstances. We allege that Mr. Nathaniel Whitmore had already embarked on an extramarital affair, thereby violating the marital contract in spirit and in law. We will demonstrate that the prenuptial agreement is unenforceable and that Mr. Whitmore is obligated, morally and legally, to provide for both Miss Whitmore and their unborn child." Her voice rang through the courtroom, not loud but resolute. Elise felt herself breathing a little steadier. Then came Nathaniel's lead attorney, Mitchell Flanagan. His voice was smooth, almost hypnotic. "Your Honor, we acknowledge the unfortunate demise of this marriage. However, my client abided by the terms of a valid prenuptial agreement, one that Miss Whitmore signed willingly and with legal counsel present. Furthermore, Mr. Whitmore has never refused to support his child, but Miss Whitmore has not afforded him the opportunity to do so privately. Instead, she seeks to extort my client by using the unborn child as leverage." Gasps stirred in the gallery. Elise's ears rang, not from the words themselves, but from the sheer absurdity of them. Elise's cheeks flushed with indignation. She felt Rachel's calming hand on her forearm. "Steady," her lawyer whispered. "We knew they'd fling mud." One by one, witnesses were called. Rachel presented the hotel security guard, who testified to Nathaniel's stays with Alessia. He described how Mr. Whitmore was often seen entering a suite late at night with Miss Moretti, corroborating date stamps on credit card receipts. Nathaniel's attorney tried to discredit the guard, implying he was seeking a quick payday. But the guard's testimony was consistent and backed by digital logs. Alessia shifted uncomfortably in her seat, momentarily glancing at Nathaniel for reassurance. Next, they presented the former executive assistant, who confirmed scheduling personal meetings for Nathaniel that were actually rendezvous with Alessia. Emails introduced into evidence showed intimate language. The hush that fell over the courtroom was electric. Each damning piece of evidence stacked up against Nathaniel. Nathaniel's team tried a different angle, implying that Elise had known about the affair and consented to an open marriage. They produced an email chain from months before the separation, in which Elise wrote, "I understand you have to travel and do what you must for the business." The defense twisted this to suggest she sanctioned all of Nathaniel's dealings. The cross-examination was harrowing. Elise's words were manipulated into unrecognizable insinuations. Her voice trembled as she explained that she was merely referring to legitimate business needs, never consenting to an extramarital affair. When it was Nathaniel's turn on the stand, he emanated an almost chilling composure. "I never intended to abandon Elise," he claimed. "We simply grew apart, and she refused to communicate her dissatisfaction until it was too late. As for Alessia, yes, we are in a relationship, but it began after Elise and I had reached an impasse." His eyes flickered over to Elise, a cold detachment in them. Rachel's cross-examination of Nathaniel was relentless. She drilled into the timelines, producing flight itineraries, phone call logs, and a stack of emails. "Mr. Whitmore," she said sharply, "you claim your affair began after you and Ms. Whitmore were essentially separated. Yet here is a booking confirmation for a Paris suite you shared with Miss Moretti on the night of your 3rd wedding anniversary. Was your marriage already at an impasse then?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "That trip was for business, Miss Moretti happened to be there as an associate. We occasionally shared accommodations to cut costs. Laughter rippled through the courtroom at the absurdity of a billionaire cutting costs. Even a few jurors exchanged skeptical glances. The lie was so thin it tore itself apart in midair. Even Justice Martinez frowned, unimpressed. Rachel hammered further, forcing Nathaniel into contradictory statements. Flight records, overlapping timestamps, champagne charges on room service receipts for two. He squirmed beneath each pointed question. Elise observed him struggle to maintain his calm facade. It was a small moment of triumph, validating all her sleepless nights and anxious days. She didn't smile, but something inside her straightened. A quiet defiance unfurled. As the hearing stretched on, negotiations ramped up behind closed doors. Nathaniel's lawyers floated settlement offers, designed to silence Elise quickly. They proposed a lump sum that might have tempted many, but Elise's determination was fueled by something far deeper than money alone. She wanted a formal apology, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and a secure future for her child. She rejected the offer, to the amazement of Nathaniel's legal team. "She's walking away from how much?" one whispered, stunned. Elise didn't flinch. During a recess, Nathaniel approached Elise in the corridor, catching her off guard. "You're making a spectacle of this," he hissed under his breath. "Do you really think you can beat me, Elise? You've refused every reasonable offer." "Reasonable?" Elise echoed, seething. "You threw me out with nothing, Nathaniel. You want to buy my silence so you can keep playing the victim. I won't let you." His eyes darkened. "You're pregnant with my child. I was willing to provide for you, quietly. But if you insist on making this public, don't expect mercy when I win." He leaned in, his breath sharp with bitterness. "You'll regret dragging this into the light." She felt a rush of nausea and fury, but she held her ground. "I don't want your mercy, I want justice." He scoffed and turned on his heel, stalking away. The sound of his footsteps echoed like a warning. But Elise stood taller than before. Yet that encounter reinvigorated Elise's resolve. She knew she was doing the right thing. By the final days of the hearing, the tension was at a fever pitch. A forensic accountant hired by Rachel took the stand, explaining how Nathaniel siphoned marital assets to fund personal indulgences for Alessia, ranging from a diamond necklace to a lavish trip aboard a private yacht near Mykonos. The data was undeniable. Receipts, wire transfers, and corporate account statements, all pointing to questionable activity. This revelation not only painted Nathaniel as an unfaithful spouse, but also hinted at financial impropriety that could concern the SEC if it involved misused funds from Whitmore Capital. Nathaniel's calm veneer began to crack. The press lapped it up, sensationalizing every twist. Rachel strategically leaked enough information to the media to ensure Nathaniel's once gilded reputation faced serious blowback. Sponsors started voicing concern. Rumors swirled that Whitmore Capital's board of directors was considering an internal review of Nathaniel's leadership. Then came the day of closing arguments. Rachel stood before Justice Martinez and delivered a speech that left the courtroom spellbound. "Marriage is a partnership," she intoned. "My client devoted herself to supporting her husband, professionally, emotionally, socially, only to be cast aside when she became pregnant with his child. Mr. Whitmore's actions are not merely morally reprehensible. They also invalidate the good faith premise upon which the prenuptial agreement was signed. It is our stance that Miss Whitmore deserves equitable restitution, not as a handout, but as her right after the betrayal and subterfuge orchestrated by Mr. Whitmore." Flanagan, on the other hand, portrayed Elise as a cunning opportunist who saw her pregnancy as leverage. He insisted that she was perfectly aware of the prenuptial agreement's implications and had willfully entangled Nathaniel in a public scandal for personal gain. With closing arguments concluded, Justice Martinez declared she would review the evidence and issue her decision in a week's time. The tension was excruciating. Elise felt simultaneously hopeful and terrified. Outside the courthouse, reporters bombarded Elise with questions as she left, guarded by Rachel and Natalie. She answered only one, her voice quivering with emotion. "I just want what's fair. I just want to protect my baby." In the swirl of camera flashes and shouted queries, Elise realized that no matter the verdict, she had found an unshakable sense of self. She was no longer just Nathaniel Whitmore's wife, or a helpless victim. She was a mother, a fighter, and a woman reclaiming her story. The final judgment would either solidify her triumph or send her back into the shadows. But one thing was certain: she would never again allow herself to be silenced. A week later, Elise and Rachel sat side by side in the courtroom, tension rippling through every muscle. Nathaniel was present, arms folded, jaw clenched. Alessia was noticeably absent, possibly to avoid further negative publicity. Justice Martinez entered, the entire courtroom falling silent. She took a seat, cleared her throat, and began reading her verdict in a measured tone. Having reviewed the evidence presented, the testimonies of witnesses, and the arguments from both counsel, the court finds that the prenuptial agreement, while validly executed, was breached in spirit by Mr. Whitmore's extramarital affair and misallocation of marital assets to fund said affair. Therefore, certain provisions limiting Ms. Whitmore's right to spousal support are nullified. Elise could scarcely breathe. Rachel gripped her hand tightly. The judge continued. Additionally, Mr. Whitmore's public and private conduct toward his pregnant wife and the undue pressure put upon Ms. Whitmore to vacate their marital home suggest a lack of equitable treatment. As such, Ms. Whitmore is awarded substantial spousal support and child support, subject to periodic review by this court. Mr. Whitmore is also responsible for covering all legal fees incurred by Ms. Whitmore in this litigation. Nathaniel's face drained of color, his lawyer's shoulders sagging in defeat. A hush fell over the room, then an excited murmur erupted. Elise felt a hot rush of tears sting her eyes, relief, vindication, and a swell of gratitude toward Rachel and everyone who had stood by her side. Outside, reporters clamored for a statement. Rachel, beaming with triumph, gave a succinct press conference. Today's verdict reaffirms that no one, no matter how wealthy or powerful, is above their responsibilities, not only legal, but moral. We are satisfied that justice has been served. Elise, for her part, made a brief statement. I'm relieved this ordeal is over. I'm grateful to the court for recognizing the truth. Now I intend to focus on the health and happiness of my child. Thank you. Nathaniel exited through a side door, ignoring the barrage of questions about his affair, his finances, and his battered reputation. In the days that followed, tabloids and business journals alike reported on Nathaniel Whitmore's downfall. His board of directors demanded answers about the misused funds. Alessia Moretti suddenly distanced herself, releasing a hollow statement that she never intended to cause harm. Social media platforms buzzed with memes mocking Nathaniel's hypocrisy, while also praising Elise for her courage. It was a public humiliation for the once untouchable billionaire. Elise moved into a comfortable apartment near the lakefront in Chicago, ironically just a few blocks from her old penthouse. But this time, it felt like her own. She used part of her settlement to invest in her interior design business, determined to forge a stable future for herself and her upcoming child. Natalie helped decorate the new nursery, painting the walls a soft lavender and setting up a crib with fairy lights hanging. Overhead late one afternoon, Rachel stopped by with a bouquet of sunflowers, a warm smile gracing her face. "How are you feeling?" she asked, glancing pointedly at Elise's growing baby bump. "Tired, but hopeful," Elise said. "I can't thank you enough for what you've done." Rachel shook her head. "You did the hardest part, Elise, facing him in court, standing up for yourself. I just helped you along the way." Elise laughed softly, the sound fragile but genuine. "You did more than help. You reminded me I wasn't alone." A gentle kick in Elise's belly reminded her of the new life that had been her anchor throughout the turmoil. She placed a hand there, feeling an overwhelming surge of love. "I can't wait to meet this little one," she said, smiling through tears. "It's funny, everything I feared is behind me now. I used to think Nathaniel was my whole world, but I was wrong. My world was always bigger than him. It just took losing everything to finally see it. Now I see just how strong I am without him." Rachel nodded. "That's the best victory of all." The sun dipped lower outside the window, casting a golden hue across the nursery walls, where soft lavender paint now covered scars of the past. In the corner, a mobile spun slowly above the crib, whispering promises of a peaceful future. And so ends the tumultuous saga of a billionaire's betrayal and a woman's unwavering fight for justice. Elise's story reminds us that no matter how powerful an adversary appears, courage and truth can level any battlefield. Betrayed and discarded, She found the resolve to challenge a man who believed his wealth made him untouchable. With the help of a brilliant lawyer and true friends, Elise claimed more than just a financial settlement. She reclaimed her life and her dignity. If you found inspiration, hope, or even just riveting drama in Elise's journey, we invite you to be part of this community. Dear friend, life has a way of breaking us open, of tearing down everything we thought was unshakable. But as the Stoics remind us, we are not disturbed by things, but by the view we take of them. Elise lost nearly everything she thought she couldn't live without, and in that space of silence and pain, she discovered something unshakable: her voice, her resilience, and a strength she never knew she had. That's the hidden gift inside adversity. It doesn't just bruise us, it shapes us. And sometimes, it's only when the life we built falls apart that we begin to build the life we were truly meant for. So if you're standing in your own storm, doubting whether you'll make it through, take heart. You're stronger than you think. And like Elise, your story is far from over. Resilience and justice belong to everyone, especially those brave enough to demand it. If this story moved you, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter. Stories that stir the heart, inspire healing, and remind us what it means to rise. We're honored to have you with us. Stay tuned for more.